Well, look, this week, old face on a thumb, the Prime Minister, Chris Luxon, needed some good news. My God, he did. After blowing $44,000 on the Pavlova shot, he thought he'd throw a bone to the New Zealand tourism industry and say, here's $70 million, we don't know where exactly, to get more tourists to New Zealand for major events like that stunning game of rugby on Saturday night at the Cape Town in Wellington. And hallelujah, there's $70 million. Wow, this apparently puts us on a level pegging with Australia or with Queensland or something. It's such great news, and God knows we need some. But is it a good idea, and how does it work? And in terms of economic theory and stuff, does it work? I thought I'd go to our mate Oliver Hartwich at the New Zealand Initiative and ask him, and he joins us now. Oliver, nice to talk to you again, mate. How are you?
I'm very well. Good morning, Sean. How are you?
Great. Wow. Is this a really great idea?
It's an ancient idea. I think it goes back to Roman times, panem et circenses. So basically bread and entertainment. That's what Roman empires usually gave to their population to keep themselves popular. This is the oldest game really in politics, to give the public some entertainment. But unfortunately, the economics haven't changed over the years. It's still a dumb idea.
Okay, it's a dumb idea. I'm so surprised at that. Why is it a dumb idea, Oliver?
Well, where do we want to start? So first of all, they announced $70 million, and just to be precise, it's not really $70 million. It is actually about 45 or 40 million, because the rest is just repurposed. So that's the first thing. They just wanted to have a nice figure that looked a bit bigger than it really is, but it's actually not all new spending. But the next problem, and that's the real problem, is something that we call opportunity costs in economics. Now, I probably need to explain that a little bit. So opportunity cost is the value of the next best foregone alternative, meaning if you hadn't spent the $70 million on some events, on the next Taylor Swift concert or whatever else it might be, what would you have done with that money? You might have used the money to pay down the debt. You might have used the money to lower tax rates. You might have used the money to maybe upgrade a school. You can't see what the $70 million would have done otherwise, because we're now spending it on some international superstars and their promoters. So that means actually there might have been better things we could have done with the money than actually wasting it on some festivals around the country. The next problem then is they say, but it creates all sorts of opportunity and employment, and it has all sorts of positive effects on the local economy. But even that may not be true, because we know that often there is a factor called displacement involved. Displacement means if you have a festival, for example, okay, the local population goes out on a Saturday afternoon, has a good time. What we don't see, again, is actually that the same people would have probably gone out on Saturday afternoon anyway. They might have gone to a restaurant or a cafe, or they might have done something else. So they would have spent their money elsewhere. And so what you're actually creating there is not a new kind of economic activity, but something that would have happened elsewhere in the local economy. And so the net effect actually on growth and employment and so on is zero. And so once you go through all these different arguments, you can see that actually the government is just redistributing some money, but it doesn't create any extra value.
So, Oliver, how is it envisaged, from what you know, that you get hold of some of the $45 million? Do you go to the government and say, I've got someone who's not a bad act here, would you just give me some money?
Yes, that's the next problem. You politicize the entire industry, because previously people in that industry had to figure out, okay, so for what kind of activity, what kind of festival, what kind of act will I find an audience? What really pays? Nowadays, you will have to then ask yourself, well, how can I convince the government? How can I convince maybe MB, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, that it's a good idea? We might even see, if this persists in the future, some overly politicized events and festivals, stuff that just pleases the government of the day. And so all of these questions now have to be answered by promoters and organizers.
Well, it's interesting, Oliver, I've been approached, I don't know quite why, to help broker and get people like Tucker Carlson here and Candace Owens here. I haven't got involved in that business because it's not my business. But would visits like that, could you go to the government and say, I want a bit of lolly to get these people over here?
Well, you probably have to demonstrate to the government that it creates an audience of several 10,000 people. But if you do that, I mean, the logic is there, then the government would have to do this too, because they have to be politically neutral, don't they?
Yeah. Oliver, I've got to be honest, this doesn't just sound like a bad, a not good idea. It sounds like a really bad idea.
It certainly sounds like a bad idea. I mean, we should probably mention the other justifications you hear from the government, and that is that the others are doing it too. So Queensland apparently does it. Well, that's not a good idea or a good justification either, because just because your neighbor jumps off a cliff, you don't do the same. So just because the Australians are doing it doesn't mean we have to follow that race to the bottom and actually throw money at international superstars. I mean, the very thought of actually throwing money to people like Taylor Swift really appalls me, because, I mean, here we have the world's biggest pop star, and she certainly swims in money into promoters. Why do we have to pay people like that extra money to come here? I don't get it.
And at the end of the day, it is just a subsidy to the promoters and the touring companies, isn't it? And the artists themselves.
That's exactly right. And in other fields of the economy, we would call this corporate welfare, and that's exactly what it is.
Is it better or worse than spending $44,000 on a couple of helicopters to get a TikTok picture of you with the Australian Prime Minister and a Pavlova?
Well, you know what? I wouldn't mind the helicopter flight as long as I'm on it.
Yeah, okay. That wasn't good expenditure either, though, was it, Oliver?
No, of course not. I mean, seriously, if you want to take a picture of a Pavlova, you could do it in Aerotown.
Well, you could use AI. You could just, you could Photoshop.
Yeah, you could do that too.
Yeah. Oliver, are we likely to see...
definitively settled it.
Are we likely to see more of this as the election date approaches? And as you said, this is as old as politics itself, bread and circuses. Is this the sort of thing that incumbent politicians, as polling day approaches, are more inclined to throw out to the populace in the hope of being re-elected?